For writers, one of the most difficult things in the world is writing. If you're someone who has incredibly vivid ideas for your book, but you're actually struggling to sit down and write it, well, this video is for you. Welcome to The Plottery, where I teach writers just like you how to make storytelling become second nature. Greetings, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about one of those things that befalls every writer in their writing career at least once, and that is writing. Yeah. Writing is very difficult. Let me just preface this entire video by saying writing is just generally difficult. It is not an easy thing to do, no matter what people might think, no matter what people might tell you. If you tell them you're a writer, they'll be like, that's fun, great, good for you. But they don't know the actual struggles of writing. So that's what this video is all about. We're gonna bust a couple of myths about writing, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit about how to actually stay consistent with your writing and how to actually want to write. Okay, but before we jump into things, I do want to make a quick announcement. So I'm actually really excited. I've got 3 workbooks coming out next month for writers. These are going to be called the Plotter's Almanac, the Character Bible, and the World Builder's Chronicle. These are coming out in March, but obviously if you are watching this video from the future, hello, future watchers, then you will likely be able to find the link to these in the description box below. For everyone who's here with me in present time, kudos to you, and yeah, it'll be up in about probably 2 weeks time from whenever you are watching this. So yeah, I'm super excited about those, and yeah, let's jump into the video. The number one thing that I want to talk about today is routines, writing routines. You've heard all about writing routines, and this is not necessarily a topic that I want to teach you about. It is more like a misbelief that I would really like to bust. Routines are not for everyone. Not everyone is gonna have a good time actually sticking to a writing routine, the same way that not every diet works for every body type, and not everyone learns things the same way. People don't absorb information in the exact same way, and therefore morning routines, exercise routines, even writing routines are not for everyone. And I think this is such an important piece of information that you need to kind of program into your head. If you are not a routine kind of person, and I know I myself am really not, even though I would really love to be, but if you are not a routine kind of person, don't force yourself into being one, because all that's gonna do is make you feel worse about yourself when you can't stick to it. Instead, what you want to do is aim to create a routine that actually works for you. And this doesn't have to be, you know, sitting down every day at the exact same time to write, but you can look at it more on like a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and then plan ahead that way and see where you can slot in times to write a certain amount of times per week. Again, doesn't have to be every day.
You don't have to be writing every goddamn day.
But just as long as, you know, you set yourself a goal of maybe how many hours a week you want to write, you want to actually sit down and do some writing. But bear in mind that you should also be blocking in time for just brainstorming and planning sessions, because if you make time to write and you sit down to write, you don't actually know what you're going to write, then what was all of that for? You're just gonna sit there in front of your laptop and you're gonna stare at the screen and you're gonna think you're a bad writer because you didn't prepare to write. So when you are doing these routines, make sure that you have a session planned where you just brainstorm whatever it is that you're going to be working on that week. Which actually brings me nicely into my second point, which is pre-writing. The importance of pre-writing. So yeah, I've just spoken about this, but basically you do want to make sure that you're not just looking at your word count as a measure of success. There's still so much to do in writing that isn't writing. Pre-writing is honestly sometimes even more important than actually writing the damn thing. You don't want to get stuck in pre-writing, you don't want to get stuck in planning and outlining, but it is an important part of the process. So even if you take a few hours in a day to just sit down and like do your outline or refresh your chapter treatment or go over your characters and make sure that all of their motivations align and everything is all good and well, that is still writing, and you should still reward yourself for that. You shouldn't slag yourself just because, you know, you didn't put any actual words down in your manuscript. You still did some kind of background work that is going to make it easier to then write your manuscript when the time comes. I also cannot stress the importance of actually sitting down and planning your novel, because this is usually the number one reason that people get stuck. So when you feel like you're not getting any words out, or you feel like you get to a certain scene in a chapter and you're just stuck and you have no idea why it's not working, you have no idea where you're going with it, where you're going with the chapter, what is happening, it's usually because you didn't do enough planning, or you don't know your character motivations going into it, or you don't even know who your characters are when you're going into that scene. And that usually means that you should go back to the basics and dedicate a few hours of actually working through that block, trying to track down where it came from, which of the characters in the scene that you're writing is actually causing this kerfuffle for you, and then figuring out a little bit more about them, a little bit more about their motivation in that particular scene and their motivation overall, and that'll usually get you unstuck. Third thing I want to talk about today is the idea of your first draft. Now, the idea of your first draft can be incredibly daunting. It feels real and you feel like it needs to be perfect. And I know that I'm talking to most of you who are watching this because we all kind of have a sense of perfectionism inside ourselves. It has been instilled there since we were kids, unfortunately. And so writing that first draft can seem incredibly scary. Really scary is what it is. What I want you to do going forward with your first draft, reframe it in your head as in it is not a first draft. It's not a first thing. It is a zero draft. It is a vomit draft. That's how I want you to think about your first draft. So we're not going to be calling it the first draft anymore. We're going to be calling it the vomit draft because I much prefer that term for it. And it just calling it that, I feel like takes so much pressure off of you thinking that it needs to be coherent, readable, anything like that. It really doesn't need to be because it is just you writing down the story. The first draft is the place where you, as the author, tell the story to yourself and where you figure out what the story actually is. And this is actually a knowledge that's kind of come to me quite recently, and it's helped me write so much better. Not so much better, but so much more, I would say. Writing better is for later drafts, okay? Writing more is for first drafts because you want to get that story out of the page and you want to understand what your characters are about and understand where your story is going, what things are working, what things aren't working. The only way you're actually going to get to know that is writing. You're not going to figure out plot holes, you're not going to figure out character motivations, you're not going to figure out the actual core of your story until you start writing it. And somewhere in the half of your vomit draft, it might change. You might zero in on that story question that you're asking, you might finally realize what the point of your story is, you might finally realize what certain characters want about halfway through, and it might change the whole course of your story. And that happens a lot. It happened to me several times, happens to most of my clients. It's absolutely 100% okay for that to happen because that's how you discover your story, and that's how you can go into your first rewrite of the project and actually polish it and hone it in to that specific idea that you discovered while writing your first draft. Okay, the fourth and final thing that I want to talk to you about today is how to actually write. And I'm sure that's why most of you clicked into this video. So I'm gonna jump into this with you, and I'm not gonna lie to you, most of this is gonna be about mindset, but it is such a crucial part of reframing some of these things that we have been led to believe as humans, not even just as writers, but as humans, that are just blocking us from actually putting the words down on the paper. Now, there is actually a point in every writer's career where they figure out what is stopping them from putting the words down on the paper and finding those triggers and finding a way that works for them. For most of us, the reason that we don't write is perfectionism, and you might not think that that's the case for you, but I can assure you that 9 times out of 10, that is what it is. It is the need to put the words down, it is the need to write the first draft and think that it actually sounds cohesive and think that, you know, you're just gonna have to do a few line edits and that's fine, your story will be great. But unfortunately, that's not the way that writing works, and our perfectionist brains can't really process that so well. So even if you think that it's not perfectionism for you, there is usually a fear of writing that you might have that is tied to perfectionism. In order to get over this, I think it's different for everyone, but you need to find a method that works for you, that alleviates the pressure of your writing feeling discombobulated or feeling all over the place or not perfect. And this method is different for everyone. So I'm gonna tell you 2 examples. One is my own personal one. This is what worked for me. I recently got a typewriter and it has completely changed my whole approach to writing, because obviously on a typewriter you can't backspace, you can backspace, but you can't really change anything, you can't edit, you can't go back, redo things. You kind of just have to keep going. And so that first weekend that I got the typewriter, I actually wrote a full chapter. It was 20 pages, obviously print pages. It was 20 pages in one weekend. And I actually came out of that weekend with a lot of finger pain because this is one of those really old typewriters, and yeah, they hurt your fingers. So there's some side effects to think about, guys. The second example is actually one of my clients. She came into our group chat recently. We have like a group chat for all of my one-on-one coaching students, and she came into it and she was like, oh my God, I think my mind has just been blown. I got myself I think she said it was a free writer. And it's basically like one of those things that's like a keyboard that has just a tiny screen, so you can only see like a couple of lines that you've written at a time. And she's struggled a lot with actually sitting down and, you know, typing and putting the words down, even though she has amazing ideas and amazing characters and a brilliant story. But it was the actual putting the words down on the paper and the fear of it not being as perfect as it is in her head, as it is in the outlining stage, I suppose. And I think that's kind of the most common fear that holds us back, is that our idea, we get so attached to it that we don't just sit down and write it. I think it's just finding that method that actually works for you personally, that makes you not want to have to go back and not want to have to edit your pages. What you can also do is actually print your pages out as you write, because I think there is a certain kind of satisfaction of actually holding your manuscript in your hands, right? Of actually seeing the pages that you've written as they are. And one hot tip I'll give you is if you double space your work, it does actually equate to one print page of what your book would be. So if you're someone who doesn't double space their work, I would highly encourage you to do so, because it does up your page count significantly, and it might help keep that motivation going of thinking like, wow, this is how many pages my book already has in print if it were to print right now. All right, thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to, you can check out my last one that I did, which is all about how to pull off flashbacks and how to do it really, really well. I hope you've actually taken something away from this video and that you will be able to go and write on, and I will see you on the flip side.